Okay, good morning, everybody. So, I am a Texas A&M grad, all right? This is SEC country. So I'll just leave it there on the table. October 23rd is when our two teams play. I won't make it down there to Texas A&M, but it'll be right here. So I like to say I'm not from South Carolina, but I am now, being here at Fort Jackson. I do have a couple comments. So Reverend, I'm going to have to steal this quote. Brotherly love that happens during an economic transaction. That is an amazing quote, and one that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. Mike White, I want to appreciate you inviting me here, Angel. It's also good, Jeff, for sponsoring us here today. And then, Susan and Carl, great teammates right outside the gate of Fort Jackson that really make us feel at home here in the greater Midlands area. I'm joined here by my Command Sergeant Major, Phil Tavernier. He is the guy who actually makes sure that I don't screw things up. He's got a heck of a lot more experience in this world of training than I do, and we go everywhere together. And I'm joined by my front office here, Captain Pirro and Sergeant Ortiz, who make sure that I'm in the right place and in the right uniform at the right time. So, a little bit about I want to talk a little big picture and then a little closer to home here at Fort Jackson. So, if you don't know it, the country made a contract with itself about 47 years ago. And that contract was that we would be an all-volunteer force. We would no longer be a conscript army. So in that time, our service, our army, has become smaller, more technical, more sophisticated than any army we've ever had on the face of the planet. But at the same time, we've also become, because we're more smaller, because of the wars that we've been involved in for the last 20 years, we've also become much more disconnected from society. If you think about it, in 1990, for those people in the room here, 40% of you would have been able to make a direct link, a family link to someone who was in the service. Today, that number sits somewhere between 13 and 15%. It's a pretty significant shift when you think about it. The country is growing, our military is much smaller, our connection to the military is that much more of a challenge for us. So opportunities like this, for us to connect America back to our Army through a conversation with the community, is something that I take very seriously. And you really think about it, 50 to 75 miles outside our post camps and stations, people really don't know the difference between this uniform and a Coast Guard uniform. So it's important that we in the military, and we as leaders in the military, get out and spend time with the community, because it's we need to make sure you understand what your Army does for you, what Fort Jackson does for you every single day, because you pay our paycheck if you haven't figured that out. So I've been at Fort Jackson for about 90 days, in the middle of an assessment of how things are going. And during that assessment, we've been hit with a couple interesting things that have happened across the country. I will tell you, like many of you, about 5 weeks ago, I had no idea where my mask was at. Right? We had all come through we had come through what we thought was the fire of COVID, and we were moving towards a solution. But the enemy has a boat. And we learned that very clearly in the Army. And no plan survives first contact. And this particular enemy adapted. And we have had to adapt the way we've done business on Fort Jackson because of the Delta variant, because of the transmissibility rates. And that has affected one of my prime objectives coming back in here to Fort Jackson, which is to turn on the lights. Right? We had all gone into a low hover, making sure we were focused on two primary missions. One was to protect the force. Those 3,500 soldiers that work on Fort Jackson every single day, the 850 that live on Fort Jackson, and the most that live here in the community, the 5,000 civilians that work on Fort Jackson every single day, and about the 10,000 trainees that are on Fort Jackson at any given time. I have an obligation to make sure those 10,000 trainees go out to the 23 different locations across America where they project to after training here, and make sure that they are safe and secure. So we focus on protecting the force and protecting that mission, which has caused us to be pretty tough in our requirements when it comes to COVID. The second thing, and I know most of you are aware of it, and Susan kind of alluded to it, is that we've just come through what we think is a closure of Afghanistan. And for most of the people in the room here, many of us have put skin in the game in Afghanistan. I myself have done the tour over there. And many of the folks in the room that have served with me have done the same thing. And as we process through this, and we process through 20 years since the horrible incidents of 9/11, the two are inextricably linked. You can't talk about 9/11 without talking about Afghanistan. You can't talk about Afghanistan without talking about 9/11. So my charge as the commander of Fort Jackson has really been to seek a better way that the soldiers that have served over there, the family members who have had someone who has served over there, the community that has invested blood and treasure over there understand what it actually means. And I think history is going to tell and retell and re-examine, and me being a history major, as you heard here, knows that history will constantly reevaluate our time over in Afghanistan. From my own personal perspective, I look at it two ways. One is emotional, one is intellectual. From an emotional perspective, there is blood, treasure, investment, emotion involved in my particular time over there in Afghanistan. I found the Afghan people as partners were very, very open to what we wanted to do over there in Afghanistan. I was there in 2012 and 13. And this is the part where I have to work through with the people within my formation, the people that I interact with every single day, is the emotional component of what we saw happen in August. There's an intellectual component to this too. The intellectual component is that we did invest in Afghanistan for 20 years. And every year, we continue to say we just need one more year. And what was the strategic objective and where had we gone to? And again, history is going to have a lot of comment on that. But I will tell you, I went and opened up my notebook from being there in 2012 and 2013, a couple comments that rose to the surface in a conversation I had with the then Secretary of Defense who came to visit in Kandahar, which is the home of where the Taliban emanated from, and the home of where Al-Qaeda made the relationship with Mullah Omar. And the first one was, we may want it more than they do. We may want it more than they do. And the second is that, are we approaching this through the lens of the Afghan form of government, not a Western form of government? All right? And the Afghan form of government is tribalism. And if you understand the tribal dynamics there, you understand where that comes from. And the third comment I made in that notebook that day was that the Afghans are survivalists. They're some of the best in the world. They've been doing it for thousands of years. And though I was talking to former warlords and political leaders within the Kandahar area and the warlords that used to be part of the Mujahideen, they always carried an extra phone. All right, one that they talked to us to, and one they talked to their friends. So I just think it's interesting as we move through this period in our country that we really take a step back, recognize the emotional, and start looking at the intellectual side of this as we move through. To move on to Fort Jackson itself. So there are 4 priorities that I look at when I came into Fort Jackson. And what I've told the command is I've got about a 90-day assessment. And I'm in the middle of doing that assessment right now. But 4 things we focus on every single day. The first is basic combat training. So we train over half of the soldiers that come in the Army here at Fort Jackson. They roughly approximate to about 45,000 per year of just basic trainees. They show up about 1,000 at a time every week. And they get trained in one of the 11 battalions we have over a 10-week period to then push them to the operational force. And we focus on 2 tasks when we look at basic combat training. One is to train to habit. We want those young soldiers to be able to shoot, move, communicate, and survive no matter where they go in the world. And the second side of it, what we do is we educate to understand. It's an acculturation to the Army in many ways. So it's an acculturation to the Army values, which I see as a subcomponent of national values, which are a subcomponent of a universal moral code. And we work with those soldiers every single day to make sure that they leave after that 10 weeks with a base understanding and acculturation to the Army's values. Not to say that we don't live those values here today. We absolutely do. We want to emphasize them and amplify them. The other thing we do is what we found is that we've got to spend a heck of a lot more time in what we call health and holistic fitness of the 45,000 soldiers that come through, or trainees that become soldiers, in our cadre, by the way. And this means being physically fit, being mentally fit, and being spiritually fit. All right? So the physically fit, everyone kind of understands what that means. Mental fit, we talk about resilience. And then spiritual fitness is not religious fitness, it's spiritual fitness, which is really understanding what their core purpose is and really helping young soldiers define who it is they are. And all these things help prevent what we call harmful behaviors, so that they go to the Army the best version of themselves. And that's really what we want them to be after their experience in the 10 weeks of basic combat training, and then when they go into the Army itself. Whether they stay for one tour of service or they stay for 20, we want them to be the best version of themselves, to come back to the community, come back to the Lexingtons, because there's a lot of them around across the country, by the way. My kids live in Lexington, Kentucky. And I see the K back there. So. We want them to be the best version of themselves, and the unquantifiables of discipline, leadership, inspiration, work ethic, all that comes back to the community. And we see that as a big piece of what we do there, and when we train these folks that come through there. The second priority we have is leader development. So leader development is tied to basic combat training. But what you don't know is that we've got other schools on Fort Jackson. We've got the Adjutant General School, we've got the Finance School, we've also got the Leader Training Brigade, and we also have the school for all the chaplains in the Army come through there. And that roughly approximates to an extra 10 to 15,000 per year that come through there in terms of the training base itself. And they live all over the place here and all over the Midlands area itself. So leader development is point 2. Point 3, as a priority for me, is quality of life. And I think in many ways, this quality of life is directly tied to what you all do here and what we do in and around the entire Midlands area itself. And when I talk about quality of life, I talk about the experience of the soldiers and their family that live here in the Midlands area, whether it's on Fort Jackson or off Fort Jackson itself. And the indirect approach to really good training happens to be that the family loves being in the Fort Jackson area, that the soldier loves being in the Fort Jackson area, that they are a part of the community, that that when they are not working, they are present in the moment and experiencing what the Midlands does for them. And I'll tell you, it is just from my own personal experience, being welcomed in the community here was one of the most phenomenal experiences I've ever had. I moved 27 times in 50 years. This has probably been the best. So I'm an Army brat, all right? So I'm one of those kids that moved all over the place as a youth, and I just said, well, I like what I'm doing. I'll just stay in it. I'll just do this for the rest of my time alive. I like to say I've been in the Army for 30 years and I'm still thinking about making it a career. We'll see. But that connection to the community is such an important part of what we do. And that quality of life really kind of, we've had some degradation in it. We've had some degradation as a direct result of really focusing on protecting the force and protecting the mission. So we are having challenges in being able to hire folks to be able to work on Fort Jackson. Or just like everybody else, there's this aversion right now going on that's really surprising to us in our morale, welfare, and recreation component that we have on Fort Jackson. We're looking for over 200 people to hire. And in our dining facilities, we're looking for almost 150 people to hire. In our Director of Public Works, we're about 50% strength of where we need, and that has a direct impact on the quality of the experience of being in and around Fort Jackson. So it is a big push, and I'm pushing real hard at my level to make sure that the wages that we operate under from a federal government perspective are competitive with the local market. All right, that doesn't mean I'm a market competitor with you. I just want to expand the market. How's that? But we are looking for talent, and I am working very hard to make sure as wages increase that the wages that we give are commensurate with. The fourth priority that I look pretty hard at is what I did term outreach, but what really needs to be termed community engagement. And it's what we're doing here. It's the connection to the community that's so important. That the connecting America back to our Army in a way that you understand the challenges and also the value proposition of what service to the nation means in many ways. And we do it through lots of different ways. The connection with the Chambers of Commerce, with the Rotaries, with the school systems, with business and industry across the Midlands area and across the state. And oh, by the way, I expanded even farther across the nation when it comes to the accessions of when we bring talent into the Army itself. It is a big piece of at least one of my priorities here. So I'll kind of leave it at that. I want to thank you all very much for the time to come talk to Team Lexington and Team Columbia, because I see a couple of them over here. And I'll open it up for questions. Okay, or just clap.
Can you repeat the three things you had in your notebook?
About Afghanistan, the three things. So one was, do we want it as much as they want it, all right? Or we may want it more than they want it. The second had to do with they're survivalists, all right? That's a pretty big component. And the third is, what form of governance were we actually advocating there? Okay. All right? Yes, sir.
Pick up on my question to you at Rotary a few weeks ago. You talked about spiritual formation. In that, we've seen a lot in the news about soldiers being taught things about critical race theory and other things like that. Can you speak to, is that blown out of proportion in the media, or if you could address that, please?
Yeah, I remember that question. Actually had to look up what critical race theory was. I'm just kidding. So look, I think the last part of your question was the answer. It is a bit blown out of proportion, all right? So I have an obligation as a senior leader in the Army to understand all sides of an argument. I have to understand all sides of the narratives that are out there in order to make what I think is the best, most informed decision. In my role as a senior leader, and I think every senior leader across all the services thinks exactly the same way. And I hesitate. It's interesting dynamic that's happened over the course of the last few years of the polarization of particular points of view. And I have skin in the game on this based off the last job I had as the Deputy Commanding General of the United States Army Recruiting Command. In that particular case, we operated a lot in the social media space because that's where today's youth are at. And if you have any appreciation for the social media platforms we have today, the algorithms today are so much different than they were 10 years ago that we amplify in a particular narrative or a particular set of interests. And it gets louder and louder, it becomes an echo chamber. We, as senior leaders, really have to steel ourselves against existing in an echo chamber. And we have to understand all sides of the arguments, whatever they may be, in whatever medium we're talking about, to be able to make better informed decisions. And I think that to me is critical thinking. Critical thinking, which I think is such an important part of what we do as senior leaders. Well, great. I appreciate the time speaking with you all today. I think, again, as I opened up with, that the relationship between your Army, all right, and our country is such an important one. All right, we are your Army. And what we do every single day is to make sure the conversations that happen in this country can happen. That they can happen. And I feel very proud that we're able to do that every single day. So thank you all for your time. And thank you for your interest. And if you're ever on Fort Jackson, just give me a call. Victory starts here. Thank you.